Tomoko closed the bedroom door on her husband. He was lying face up, motionless, struggling to breathe. She made her way out of the house and into the evening twilight. Down an alley, through a small clutch of trees and up the ancient stairs to a local shrine. She tossed 5 yen into the offering box, clapped twice, and then prayed. Her thoughts quickly overwhelmed her and she dropped to her knees, sobbing. She let out a moan in pain and sorrow and dropped her head once more, weeping all the while. And then a dry old man's voice spoke to her from the shadows. "You're in great pain, I see. I can help thee, for a fee." "My husband is dying," she croaked back. "There's nothing you can do." "So you've given up then, have you? I think not. If you had, you would not be here." She knew he was right. This voice from the dark beneath the shrine. She also knew she had nothing to lose. So she bit. "What do you want in return?" she asked wearily. "Flesh." "Flesh? What do you mean?" she asked. "Like goat or cow's meat?" "No," the voice began. "Human flesh, a higher form of sacrifice. Provide the flesh, and I will provide a talisman." This is absolute madness, she thought, but she was willing to try anything. To lose her husband would be losing her entire world. "Show me this talisman then," she demanded. And he did. From the darkness below, a golden glint caught her eye. It became more glowing and beautiful as it moved closer to her, and she reached out for it. "No," snapped the voice. "First, the flesh." "I shall return," she committed. "And you shall give me the talisman." Her expression turned. "Or I will gut you like a fish." "Stay calm, young lady," the voice beckoned. "You'll need a clear head to complete this task." A day passed, and later that night the lady stepped from within the trees and made her way up the stairs to the shrine, her arms wrapped as if she was carrying a small child. She clutched it closer as another person on their way down passed her side. Arriving at the shrine, she knelt down and spoke. "An arm for a talisman." Nothing. There was no reply. She knelt lower and could hear the sickly slurping sounds of something like a slug slithering towards her. "An arm for a talisman," she spoke louder. And then the slurping stopped, and a small voice spoke out. "You have it then, do you? Show me this arm." Tomoko unwrapped the cloth she was holding to reveal a fresh, bloody, human arm. "Good," croaked the voice. "Pass it down to me." "The talisman first," she demanded. A small rectangle was pushed from out of the shadows, along the floor by a small, gnarled hand. The same hand quickly snatched the stained cloth package, and then disappeared back into the pitch black. Tomoko clutched the talisman to her chest and swiftly ran off into the night. A week had passed, and Tomoko firmly believed that once she had placed the talisman by her husband's bedside, his condition had improved. He was no longer in a silent and comatose state. He would often moan and gasp, as if trying to communicate with her once more. She pondered the possibility of attending the shrine once again and cutting another deal in the hopes of even further expediting her husband's recovery. Then, a knock at the door broke her train of thought. Who could this be? She silently questioned. She opened the front door to a police officer who was opening his wallet to reveal his badge. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am," he spoke as he flashed his credentials. "I'm Constable Iwasaki from the Kotocho Division. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" She stared at his badge, and then deep into his eyes, silently, just staring at him. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" She snapped out of it. "No, of course. Please, go ahead. What's this about?" "Thank you. Look, There's been a dead body found in the area, and we were wondering if you may have seen anything suspicious or have noticed anything at all out of the ordinary in the last week or so." "Why, no. Nothing at all," she quickly responded. "Are you sure? Please, think hard now." "No. Do you know who the person is? The body you found?" "Yes, it's been identified. It was a person who was here on business from out of town. The next of kin has been located and notified." "Oh, good," she said somberly. "I'm glad the family know." She then began to close the door on the officer. "Look," he began, "here's my card. Please call me if you see or hear anything that might help us." The door closed before he could hand over the card. Tomoko retreated back into her house, slightly shaken by what she had been told, but trying not to let it sink in. She decided to retire early that night, however would fail to sleep soundly, much like any other night in recent times. It didn't take long before her mind was made up. The sleepless night was the catalyst, and she found herself on her knees at the shrine once more. The creature came forward from the shadows and had happily entertained her request. A larger piece of flesh was the asking price this time, for a talisman twice as strong. She committed, and returned the next night with a severed leg, fresh, bloody, and quickly snatched by the creature beneath in exchange for a talisman twice the size, and purportedly twice the power. Tomoko, clutching the talisman close to her chest, walked swiftly into the woods, disgusted with herself for what she had done. She kept drilling into her mind, though, that it would all be worth it, if it meant saving her husband's life. A week had passed, and her husband's condition had still not improved. In fact, she was convinced that he was getting worse. She was furious. Caring for her husband was a full-time job, continuous changing of his dressings and constant administration of drugs to alleviate the pain. It was all slowly taking its toll on her. She had not eaten in several days and was beyond hungry, feeling frail and angry, so left the house to buy groceries from a night market. It was on her way there that she saw the poster. It was pleading for any information on the multiple murders in the area. Police claimed they were following up several leads, however were demanding local citizens to remain vigilant and not to venture out alone, especially at night. Tomoko immediately grew anxious and half ran all the way back to her apartment. She closed the door behind her, dropped her bags, and fell back against the door. A large moan came from the bedroom beyond, her husband needing attention. And she slipped down onto her backside, hung her head, and cried. She was at her wit's end and didn't know how she would be able to carry on. Early the next morning, she was a nervous wreck. She hadn't slept as her husband had been crying out in severe pain throughout the night. She needed to find some peace, so decided to make her way to the shrine once more, to pray and attempt to find some comfort in doing so. Just as she was about to step out of the wood, she saw several police cars at the shrine and officers in every direction, scouring every inch of the surrounding grounds. She peered through the leaves, her face hidden in the shadows, and then decided to return home as quickly as she could. As she turned, a police officer was blocking her exit. She let out a small cry at the shock of seeing him. "I'm sorry to startle you, miss," the officer began. "This area has been designated a crime scene and is off limits to the public. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Tomoko looked over at the shrine. Officers were carting black plastic bags from underneath the shrine to a nearby van. "Oh, I see," Tomoko managed to get out. "What happened here?" "We've apprehended an old homeless man who had been living under the shrine." "A homeless man?" Tomoko was confused. "Yes, we strongly believe he may be connected to the murders in the area. I shouldn't share this, however the decaying remains of several skeletons have been found along with him." "Several?" She gasped for air as the words left her mouth. "Yes, it appears we have found our man. Please head back home now, and practice some discretion until some official statements are made." "Of course," Tomoko replied. and then fled back to her home just as several news teams began to descend on the area. She returned home and cried. She had been fooled. The talismans were worthless, tricked by a filthy, deformed, cannibalistic, homeless man. Her husband groaned from the room beyond. She winced at the sound. She was done. She had no idea what to do with him. She knew the end was near. That evening, she tuned into the local news with an odd feeling of guilty anticipation. And then she saw it. She saw several other local people had been arrested for murder. They had apparently all been regular visitors of the shrine, and they had all fallen for the old man's demands. Like Tomoko, they all thought they had been communicating with a higher deity, and if they were compliant to its commands, they would get what they wanted. And also, like Tomoko, they had all been fooled. A huge moan came out of the bedroom, and then silence. Tomoko couldn't pull herself away from the television though. Not yet. Not until she had heard it all. She watched to the end, then switched it off, and sat in silence. They were all going to be tried for murder, and she rose to her feet. But not her. No, not her. She walked into the bedroom. Her husband's blanket had fallen off his body. He wasn't breathing. He was dead. She stared at his lifeless form, missing an arm and a leg. A huge thanks to all who support us through Patreon, and an extra special thanks to the Dark Cosmos, 5 Plate Destiny, Christina, Patrick Lyke, and Richard Turlay.